Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that literally affects every single one of us, the fascinating evolution of social generations. We're going to completely unpack the timeline of human generations, explaining everything about different cohorts completely up until now. We'll break down the whole shebang from the greatest generation all the way to the screen-swiping Gen Alpha.
So take a quick second and ask yourself, which generation do you actually belong to? And, more importantly, what does that really mean? It's incredibly easy to fall into the trap of using pop culture stereotypes. We've all heard the complaints about lazy millennials or out-of-touch boomers or iPad-addicted kids. But today we're going way beyond those cliches to understand the real sociology and the powerful historical forces behind your generational identity. Okay, let's dive into this. Today we'll cover what are social generations, the historical cohorts, the technological transition, the true digital natives, and finally, the multi-generational workplace.
Section 1. What are social generations?
A social generation isn't just some random chunk of years on a calendar. Early sociologists like Emile Littré back in the 1800s and Karl Mannheim in the 1920s, they actually established this framework. They realized that when a group of people experiences the exact same major historical events and, crucially, the exact same pervasive technological shifts while coming of age, it creates a deep bond. Your shared culture and the environment you grew up in, they dictate your generation far more than just how your parents raised you.
But before we get too deep into the weeds here, I absolutely love this quote by George Orwell. He said, "Every generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it and wiser than the one that comes after it." It's a great reminder that generational tension and ageism, they're really nothing new. We've always rolled our eyes at older and younger people. But what makes today truly unique is the incredibly rapid speed of modern change.
Section 2. The historical cohorts. Starting right at the turn of the 20th century, we begin with the greatest generation, born between 1901 and 1927. Also called the GI generation, this cohort quite literally saved the world. They survived the staggering hardships of the Great Depression and fought World War II. Following them is the silent generation, born roughly 1928 to 1945. They're often labeled the traditional generation, but ironically, these are the exact same people who actually ended up driving the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, and even birthed rock and roll. No way you can call that silent, right?
Think about it. The sheer severity of the Great Depression forced the greatest generation into an intense survival mode, which made them remarkably frugal and humble. Meanwhile, the silent generation benefited from a massive post-war boom. They grew up with the rise of television, home appliances, and this huge migration to the suburbs, making them highly adaptable, yet often quite loyal to authority and conformity.
Section 3. The technological transition.
All right, here is where we see a massive pivot. The driving force of generational change suddenly shifts away from global wars and toward the accelerating engine of technology. Following World War II, we get the baby boomers. Born into unprecedented middle-class growth, they grew up with brand-new tech like air conditioning and much more accessible travel. But they also came of age during the Vietnam War. Then we have Generation X. Gen X experienced a totally different world, a rise in working parents, skyrocketing divorce rates, and the birth of MTV. They were the latchkey kids coming home to empty houses, which made them incredibly independent and frankly a bit cynical, living under the looming shadow of the Cold War. Now, what's really interesting about this data is how researchers literally map these generations by the defining tech of their decade. It's just an incredible progression. We went from the 1960s, where tech meant massive room-sized mainframes acting as a sort of distant authority, to the 1970s microchip pioneers, who had this gritty DIY culture. By the 80s, Gen X became digital immigrants, using floppy disks as practical tools, which led right into the 90s dial-up innovators. Almost overnight, the pace of human development was suddenly tied directly to a microchip.
Section 4. The true digital natives.
Now we're looking at cohorts that have literally never known a world without pervasive, instant connectivity. First up, we have Millennials, which is the largest living generation. They're the first true digital natives, coming of age just as the internet and social media exploded onto the scene. After them, Gen Z or Zoomers. Gen Z never even had to wait around for dial-up tones. They grew up instantly accessing any information anywhere directly from a smartphone in their pocket. And that paves the way for the still developing Gen Alpha, born from 2013 onward. These are the kids currently growing up with tablets and artificial intelligence as their baseline.
Comparing these two massive groups reveals a pretty sharp contrast. Millennials tend to be very open to change and highly value-driven, but they're also deeply burdened by historic levels of student debt and a really tough housing market.
Gen Z, on the other hand, had instant exposure to the entire world's problems at a very young age. Neutrally speaking, sociologists note this has made them arguably the most intelligent and informed generation yet, but simultaneously the most prone to anxiety and cynicism. They place a huge premium on direct, assertive communication and mental health awareness.
And finally, Section 5, the multi-generational workplace. So what actually happens when you force all these living generations with completely different technological and historical backgrounds to collaborate in the exact same modern office? Well, as highlighted by research from the Journal of Cultural Analysis and Social Change, the friction you feel at work isn't just people being stubborn. Academic studies prove that workplace conflicts are fundamentally driven by entirely different, deeply ingrained motivational structures. You literally have people wired for different eras trying to solve the exact same problem today. So the crucial point is really understanding these differing priorities. Older cohorts, like Boomers and Gen X, tend to prioritize stability, loyalty, and formal recognition. They see loyalty to an organization as a massive virtue, and they highly favor compromise. Younger cohorts, meaning Millennials and Gen Z, prioritize flexibility, constant agile feedback, and corporate social responsibility. For them, a company's social impact and agility aren't just nice little perks, they're absolute non-negotiable baselines for employment.
We can literally see this clash in the numbers when looking at hybrid work preferences. Out of a score of 5, Gen X rates it a 3.5. Their socialization favors physical presence and more formal structures. But Gen Z, they rated a massive 4.7. To a Zoomer, seamless hybrid connectivity is just how the world works. Restricting it feels like a bizarre step backward in time.
And this brilliantly illustrates the shift. 52%. Over half of all Gen Z respondents in the study gave the absolute highest possible rating to flexible working as their core workplace motivator. It vastly outranks traditional career advancement or climbing the corporate ladder. They want to integrate their life and work on their own terms, full stop.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this research? How do we turn all this friction into actual innovation? Well, diverse organizations need to emphasize empathetic, value-based leadership. They need to implement intergenerational mentoring. I mean, just imagine combining the deep institutional memory and resilience of older generations with the digital fluency and agility of younger ones. By prioritizing psychological safety and blending stability with flexibility, companies can build incredibly resilient powerhouse teams.
Which leaves us looking straight to the horizon. As artificial intelligence begins to completely take over, how will the upcoming Generation Alpha, often called the AI navigators, shape the future of society and work? These are kids who will literally never know a world without ChatGPT instantly answering their questions. How will this unprecedented technological leap define the next great shift in human generations? It is definitely a fascinating question to ponder. Thanks for exploring the data with me today on The Explainer.